The White Owls. An old house stood in the middle of dark woods. No one lived in it now. It was a very big house, and it was made of stone. There were 2 stone posts at the gates, and on the top of each post was a big white stone owl. One day, Billy, Johnny and Roger set out for dark woods. They had never been in the old house, but they had been past the gates and looked into the garden. As they went out of the village, they met Mr. Red Hat and Mr. Brown on the white bridge over Deep River.
"Hello," said Mr. Brown. "Are you off on for a day in the woods?"
"Yes," said Johnny. "We're going to the old house," said Billy.
"Have you seen the white stone owls on the gatepost?" asked Mr. Brown. "The owls are lifting their wings as if they were going to fly."
Johnny nodded.
"Well," said Mr. Brown, "when the white owls hear the village clock strike 12 at night, they fly up into the sky and over High Hill and back to the gateposts again."
Billy's mouth fell open.
Mr. Red Hat laughed. "Ha ha, that's right," he said. "Well, have a good day."
The boys went on over the bridge.
"Do you think the white owls do fly when the village clock strikes 12? said Roger.
"I don't know," said Johnny. "But let's come tonight and see. There will be a full moon."
"I can't go out at night," said Billy. "All right, Johnny and I will go," said Roger. "You would be frightened of the dark."
"We will tell you in the morning, Billy," said Johnny. "I will meet you on the bridge tonight, Roger, as soon as the moon comes up." That night, Johnny lay in bed, looking out over the village. He heard Grandmother Yellow Hat and Grandfather Yellow Hat go to bed. It was very still. As soon as he saw the moon coming up over the river, he got up and went down to the door. He opened it and slipped outside. The moon was coming up over the trees, and the road shone white in the moonlight. Johnny went off down the road until he came to the bridge over Deep River. Just as Johnny got to the bridge, Roger slipped out of the door of the Red Hat's house and ran along to the bridge.
"I began to think you were not coming," he said to Johnny. "I was looking out for you."
"It is not 12 yet," said Johnny. "The moon is just up. Come on." They went over the bridge and along the road into dark woods. It was very dark under the trees, and it seemed a long way to the old house. They had not gone far when they heard a cry in the wood.
"Hoo, hoo, hoo, hoo,"
came the cry. Roger stopped.
"What is it?"
he said. "It's just an owl calling," said Johnny.
"Let's go back," said Roger. "It must be after 12.
"No, that is just one of the owls who live in the wood," said Johnny.
"Hoo, hoo, 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 hoo,"
came the owl's cry.
"Oh, I'm going back," said Roger. "Come on, Johnny, let's go back."
"Not now," said Johnny. "I want to find out if the white stone owls will fly. The village clock will soon strike 12.
"Hoo, hoo, hoo, hoo,"
came the owl's cry.
"I'm going back,"
said Roger. He turned and ran back down the road. Johnny stood and looked after him. He felt a bit frightened himself. The woods were very dark and still. "I must see the white owls," he said to himself. "Jennifer came to the wood at night with Whitefoot, and if Jennifer can come, so can I." He went on, and soon came to the old stone gateposts of the big house, with the big white stone owls. The moon shone down on the stone owls as they stood there lifting their wings, as if they were just going to fly. But Johnny knew that was the way the owls always looked. They were the biggest owls he had ever seen, much bigger than the owls who lived in the woods. He sat down on the ground against one of the gateposts. The trees all around him were very dark and still. He looked up at the sky. The stars were all out and the moon was full. He looked hard at the owls. Johnny had been looking at the owls for a long time when he felt his eyes shut. He opened them again. The owls were still there. His eyes shut again. Johnny shook himself. "I shall go to sleep if I sit here," he said. "I will climb on the owl's back." So he climbed up the gatepost, right onto the back of one of the big white stone owls. The clock in the village struck 12. Bong! Johnny felt the big wings under him lift slowly. The owl's head turned. He saw its eyes shine, and before he could slide down to the ground again, the owl was off, flying up and over the trees with Johnny on its back. Up and up they went, high over dark woods. Johnny lay on the white owl's back and held on as hard as he could. He was very frightened to begin with, but he did not fall off. Soon he began to look around as the big wings lifted under him. He looked up at the sky. The moon was very bright and the stars were out. He looked down over the owl's back as they flew high over the village. He could see the village far below him in the moonlight, with the white houses and the white road. On and on they flew, over the woods to the hills. When they came to High Hill, the owl flew higher and higher. Johnny could see Deep River below him, white in the moonlight. The river ran on and on, past the hills and woods, until far away, very far away, Johnny saw the sea. The white owl flew 3 times around High Hill, and then turned back for the big house in dark woods. As the owl turned again over the big house and began to fly down to the gatepost, Johnny felt himself slip a little. He held on as hard as he could, but the owl's feathers were hard to hold, and he slipped a little more and a little more until he could hold on no longer. He slipped off the owl's back and felt himself falling and falling until the ground seemed to come up to meet him. He shut his eyes. When Johnny opened his eyes again, he found himself on the ground at the foot of the stone gatepost. He looked up. The big white owls were back on the posts, looking as if they had never been away. Johnny got up. He heard the village clock strike 1. "I must get home," he said to himself. He ran back down the road and out of dark woods as hard as he could. He ran over the bridge and on until he came to his grandfather's house. He slipped in at the door and up to bed. Next morning, Johnny met Roger on the bridge. "Well," said Roger, "did the white owls fly?" Johnny nodded. "I climbed on the owl's back and flew with him right up over the village to High Hill," he said. "We flew so high that I could see the sea." Mrs. Blue Hat and Billy Blue Hat came over the bridge. "Did you see the owls fly?" asked Billy. "Yes," said Johnny. "What owls?" asked Mrs. Blue Hat. "The stone owls on the gatepost at the old house," said Billy. "Mr. Brown said that when they hear the village clock strike 12 at night, they fly up over High Hill." "Don't be silly, Billy," said Mrs. Blue Hat. "They are stone owls. They never hear the clock strike." "Oh," said Billy. "But Johnny said—" "Come along, Billy," said Mrs. Blue Hat. "We can't stand here all day." Mrs. Blue Hat and Billy went on. Roger looked at Johnny. "Did the stone owls fly?" he asked. Johnny nodded.
I flew on the owl's back over High Hill, he said, and I saw the sea.